Screen. Don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath. It's reliable on that. Okay, Erev Tov, everyone. So let's discuss a little bit about Minhagei Shloshta Shavuot, the 3 weeks period of time that we're in now. As usual, as we often do, we'll use the Pnei Halacha as a basis, as a springboard for discussion. It's interesting, first of all, I'll just point out that the 3 weeks of the concept, here we find a large discrepancy between different Eidot, between Ashkenazi and Sefardi Minhag, but really, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, there is no such thing as the 3 weeks. Shulchan Aruch has a siman that talks about the things from Rosh Chodesh Av, and Shavuot Shechal Bo, according to the different gradual levels of where we increase in the different practices, morning practices that we have, beginning from Yudzayin B'Tammuz, going through, right, as I said, Rosh Chodesh Av is another step, Shavuot Shechal Bo, the week of Tisha B'Av, is another step as well. And it can be very confusing. If you go through the Shulchan Aruch, you'll see that the Ramah will add in, and our minhag is from Yudzayin B'Tammuz, and our minhag is from Yudzayin B'Tammuz, because there is no period of 3 weeks in terms of these practices, according to the Shulchan Aruch, and therefore, according to Sefardi practice, there's not that much that changes from now until we get to Rosh Chodesh Av. Ashkenazim have a little bit more that we are machmer about, and different things that were added throughout the generations. So he writes here, Shloshta Shavuot shematchilim elal Yudzayin B'Tammuz. Again, this is a question. It's obviously now past, but many people asked this year. It seems to come up quite a lot. Do the restrictions of the 3 weeks begin on the morning of Yudzayin B'Tammuz, or they begin the night before? And generally speaking, they begin the night before, even though the fast is only in the day. But for this period, in any event, according to everybody, it's Yamim Shel Tza'ar. This is a time of distress. It's a time of mourning. Shalehem Ne'emar, the pasuk in Eicha, which says Kol Rodfei Sigua Bein HaMetzarim. That's where the name Bein HaMetzarim comes from. Lachen Himlitzu Chachamim Linkot B'Mishneh Zeirut B'Yamim Elu Shemuadim LaPuranut. So the first thing is, Chazal said we should take extra precautions. We should be extra vigilant, not to do dangerous things in these days. For example, one goes out on a tiyul, one goes to swim in the sea, right, until Rosh Chodesh Av, there's no prohibition of swimming. Although all the time we need to be careful, we have a mitzvah in the Torah, we need to be vigilant in terms of anything that's related to pekuach nefesh. That's something we should be careful about always. We aren't always careful enough as we need to be, right? We have this, mentioned it the other day, we have this mantra, especially in Israel, Yeh Beseder, don't worry, everything will be fine. No, Torah does not say Yeh Beseder. You have to take precaution to make sure that it will be okay. But in these days, we have to be extra careful. So things that are a little bit dangerous, or things that are a bit more dangerous, we should avoid, or at least be extra careful when doing them. כדי לציין את אופיים של הימים הללו, תקנו חכמים לקרוא בשלוש השבתות שבין המצרים haftarot העוסקות בפורעניות. Okay, so we have the 3 special haftarot that we read, these 3 Shabbatot, which reflects the mood of the time of year, and after that, after Tisha B'Av, we then have the 7 haftarot of Nechama, comfort. ואף שחכמים לא תקנו תקנות מיוחדות לבתי צער ואבלות בשלושת השבועות, even though, this is what I started off with, in the 3 weeks from the period of Yudzayin B'Tammuz, there aren't that many, if any, decrees, takanot as such, expressing the sorrow, the pain, the mourning of this time. Nonetheless, there are certain practices, minhagim, relating to mourning, which we've taken upon ourselves, and therefore, sort of dancing and parties of the like, that is the custom is to refrain from that, so weddings, etc., during this time. Right, there are minhagim which are only in some communities. יוצאי אשכנז וחלק מיוצאי ספרד נוהגים שלא להסתפר בשלושת השבועות. The Ashkenazi practice, and some of the Sfaradim hold not to have haircuts during this time. יש מחמירים בזה רק מראש חודש אב. There are those that are only stringent on this from Rosh Chodesh. ושאר יוצאי ספרד נוהגים להחמיר בזה בשבוע של חבה. And there are those who are only stringent on this in the week of Tisha B'Av as well. לגבי נישואין, נהגו יוצאי אשכנז תימן ורוב יוצאי ספרד שלא לערוך נישואין בכל 3 השבועות. Okay, many communities have the practice, as is ours, not to have weddings at all during the 3 weeks, and there are others who have until Rosh Chodesh Av. It's an interesting question, actually came up this year. Again, it's one of those things that now seems quite irrelevant. But while the war, the war with Iran was going on, so obviously there were no gatherings, even Shiur was closed, there were no weddings at the time, and there were some letters that came out. People asked the chief rabbis, could an exception be made to have weddings during the period of Bein HaMetzarim? In the end, the war ended much sooner than I think many people anticipated, and it wasn't necessary. But there was a halachic discussion about there's an extenuating circumstance, and maybe had it continued and those weddings had to be pushed off, there was room to say that maybe even now until Rosh Chodesh that they could take place later. But as I say, it became a bit of a moot point. Okay. So rikudim mecholot klei zemer. So what about dancing, musical instruments, etc.? So Iratya kadvu achronim she'asur la'aroch rikudim u'mecholot miyud zayin b'tamuz v'ad Tisha B'Av. So this appears in the Magen Abraham. He says that you should not have dancing, right? Rikudim mecholot from Yud Zayin b'Tamuz until Tisha B'Av. Bichlal zeh asur b'yamim elu negina v'shmiat klei zemer. And that includes. There's a lot to talk about here, exactly what is included in this. But essentially, playing musical instruments, listening to musical instruments, we refrain from that during this time. Even though it's interesting, it's not actually written, it doesn't say anywhere explicitly that during the 3 weeks you're not allowed to listen to music. It says you can't have rikudim or mecholot, that's the expression. And there are different explanations that are brought to contemporary poskim to why that is. One explanation is, really, we find in Chazal that there's a prohibition of listening to music throughout the year, right? Of listening to musical instruments, because that's part of the Zech El Churban, right? I don't know that many people who are makpid on that nowadays. Actually, I have a friend. I know somebody who's makpid on this throughout the entire year. I think he's one of the few in the generation. But for various reasons, and we can talk about another time, we aren't so makpid on that. But we say if there's ever a time during the 3 weeks, which is now from until leading up to Tisha B'Av, which is a time when we are thinking about the Churban a little bit more than at the time, so it seems appropriate that this is a time to refrain from it. So, for example, Fugei Harkada, all sorts of dance classes, etc., concerts, Arvei Shira, these sorts of things, you should not have during these 3 weeks. You should not participate in them. What if you have something which has got background music? So he brings here an example. Says Chuge Robi, it's an exercise class, but it has music at the background. So generally speaking, most poskim would say, while it's still Chodesh Tammuz, before Rosh Chodesh, you can be maker on that, and better to switch the music for something which is a little bit less upbeat. But if you need it for the exercise, etc., then there is what to allow. Mutar liyudil shemitpanes menegina. Interesting question. What if you have somebody who is parnasah? He's a musician. That's how he earns his living. Can he go? So he obviously can't play music at Jewish parties because there are no Jewish parties during these weeks. But at a non-Jewish party, can he go and play? So until Rosh Chodesh, he says that's okay. Even if the music is upbeat, so it's based on the Biur Halacha. He says that he's not really enjoying the music. He's at work. He's busy playing, so that would be allowed. But from Rosh Chodesh, but it's music which leads to happiness, leads to dancing, celebration, etc. So therefore, another question related to Parnasah, somebody who's a music teacher, teaches guitar or piano, instrument, whatever it is. So he says that one can continue teaching for Parnasah until Rosh Chodesh. Again, this is learning, which does not bring simcha. This to the sentence, and you can extrapolate this to other things. He says, generally, the teachers and the students aren't so happy when they're in class. Right? It's about but it's out. He's practicing, he's learning. Okay, it's not the essence here. It's not the simcha. Mineged, im yafsiku yigalem הפסד למורים, וגם התלמידים יזדקקו אחר כך למאמץ נוסף לחזור למסלול הלימודים. If you will stop, so it's going to cause a monetary loss. to the teachers, to the students, etc. Therefore, one can continue until Rosh Chodesh Av. As you can see, all of these halachot, we are much more lenient until Rosh Chodesh, because as we said at the beginning, from Rosh Chodesh, that's in the Gemara already. It says, Mishnech Nas Av, Mematin B'Simcha, in the Shulchan Aruch as well. This year, it's a bit more lenient because we don't really have Shavua Shechal Bo Tisha B'Av, because Tisha B'Av is going to be on a Sunday. So the Shavua Shechal Bo falls away. But from Rosh Chodesh is more, as we said, from before Rosh Chodesh, Yudzayin B'Tammuz, is like extra minhagim that were added on later. And therefore, when we have questions and doubts, etc., there is more room to be lenient until Rosh Chodesh. That's another point, which is very logical, and which is that if you have a class or you have the teacher is learning and the students learning music, whatever, and at some point he needs to take a break. He's going to take a break from his lesson, so make the break during these 3 weeks. Right? There's no, it's not necessary to continue now. He also says if one is going to learn during the 3 weeks, so it's better. Yeah, this is the Tzitz Eliezer writes. Says Tov she'amadu b'shlosh shavot nigunim atzuvim. Better to use, better to have sad songs, not the most upbeat music as well. Again, later in the week we'll discuss further, just in terms of music and in general listening to music during this time. Is that many people ask, what about a cappella music, or what about music that's recorded, not live instruments? See, according to many poskim nowadays, the main distinction is not going to be what the source of the music is necessarily, but what the type of music is. There's a difference between music that leads to dancing and music, like we said, it's just in the background, or that's sad songs, or etc. But that we'll discuss in the coming days.